Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first virtual visit with Friends of 2021. My name is Marlena White, and on behalf of the Friends of the Lexington Main Library, I would like to wish you all a very happy National Library Week. Before we get going and welcome our special guest speakers, I'd like to recognize any board members we have with us this evening, and I do see Sarah McMaster, if you'll give us a little bit of a wave. This program is designed to be a conversation, but while our guests are speaking, I will have everybody muted just to keep the background noise to a minimum. I did want to let you know that we will be recording this program this evening for future viewing on Fossil's YouTube channel. If you have any questions or comments during the program, please feel free to utilize the chat. I will be monitoring that and will feed questions in. And at the end, we will unmute everybody so we can have a more of a conversation. This evening, we are joined by Mr. Randy Akers, Executive Director of South Carolina Humanities, as well as two speakers from the Speakers Bureau program, speaker, writer, and performer Suzie Parker Devoe, and local author and historian Tom Poland. Randy will start us off with the conversation with some information on who South Carolina Humanities is and what they do. Randy, we would especially love to hear more about the Speakers Bureau program and some of the grant opportunities that many of our friends with us this evening might be interested in. Then we will invite Tom and Suzie to each share some experiences speaking specifically at libraries, and perhaps each of you would be willing to share some tips for a successful event from the presenter's perspective, as well as a few minutes of each of your programs. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Randy.
Okay. Thank you, Marlena. I appreciate very much being with all of you tonight. I love libraries. I was in my branch library Wednesday night for the first time in a year, and it was kind of an emotional experience. I'd really missed being in there and seeing all the books and the people and so forth. So that's fun. I'm also a member of the Friends of Richland Library, and you may not know that my wife for years has been a member of Fossil. So at any rate, it's good to be with all of you tonight, and certainly to share the stage with Suzie and Tom also, who are two of our most acclaimed Speakers Bureau presenters. You probably will, of course, know a little bit about South Carolina Humanities. I'm sure all of you have heard of it. In 2022 and 23, we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary. We're the state-based program of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And of course, we provide grant money for public humanities programs. And we also sponsor some special initiatives of our own. The one good thing about tonight is you don't have to take any notes because everything I say is on our website. So you can just go to our website. It's a very thorough and comprehensive website, and you'll get a chance to see all the things that we're doing, not only from grant programs, but like I said, special initiatives and programs that we're sponsoring ourselves. I'm in my 33rd year as director of South Carolina Humanities. So many of you have probably either seen me or my name somewhere, but if not me, TJ Wallace, who is our grants officer, the one that you'll work most closely with in your programming. TJ is also our assistant director, and she's been with us 16 years. So we got a pretty staff that's been around for a while, and we've had a chance to get to know so many people and make friends throughout the state. One thing I do want to let you know very quickly is that we're going to receive some additional, well, it used to be called CARES Act money. Now it's what is America Relief money or something, whatever the current title is. We're going to be receiving some extra federal funds probably in the end of May to be able to grant to organizations. The first round that we had last year, COVID relief grants, we were able to make 103 grants around the state and award $492,000, which was very helpful to a lot of cultural organizations and some libraries. Now, I know that you libraries probably will be able to receive some funds through the state library, but don't forget about us as well, and then look for our, we'll have guidelines and so forth for that coming up probably at the end of May, early June. So be looking for that. Those kinds of funds will be used to help you with personnel, with technology, with strategic planning, hiring consultants, programming, digitalizing resources, so forth. So please keep that in mind.
Randy, that's fantastic. Is that for nonprofits or specifically for libraries?
No, that's for all nonprofit organizations. A lot of museums received monies from us in that first round. Historical societies, organizations that are cultural organizations, and of course some libraries too, Marlene. But
Come here.
but keep that in the
Want to
back.
see Susie? Come here.
Another thing, and then I'm going to get into our grants program real quickly, but another thing that we do, special initiatives that we do a statewide humanities festival each year in a different community. And I found that in many cases where we do a festival which highlights the history and culture of a community, that the library is a good place to hold some special programs during the time of that festival. And maybe to at least set out some books. I remember one time we were in Winsboro and Sarah set out some books on the history of your county and your city. Keep in mind those kinds of opportunities. We also bring down Smithsonian traveling exhibits every year that go to 6 communities. And a lot of times the host, which might be a local museum, does partner with a local library to help assist with programming and with school children and so forth associated with that particular exhibit. Now, as I said, we're primarily a grant-making organization. As I said, you can go to our website, but we have different kinds of grants. Of course, we have major grants that we review twice a year, which are eligible to receive up to $10,000 in funds. We receive those in January and also again in August. And you can see the schedule for when you get drafts in and so forth on that. We have a mini grant program, which is up to $2,000 for smaller programs. Those are reviewed, they're due the first of each month and reviewed that same month. So there's a very quick turnaround time for that. We also have a planning grant that's available for up to $2,000. That's for programs that, of course, are going to be more extensive in scope and cost and so forth. And you want to kind of get your plan in place. And for us, a lot of times the planning grant, the organization will not only come back to us for funds, but will go to other major funding sources for funds too. So that helps in that. We have what's called a fast track literary grant. Those are received 4 times a year. And a lot of libraries do apply for those. Those are for up to $3,000. The fast track literary grants support writers series, festivals, conferences, workshops, writers residencies, things like that. And some of you might remember for 19 years, we ran what was called the South Carolina Book Festival. Well, that got to be a little too large for us to continue to handle. But what we're doing instead is trying to support literary activities around the state at various venues, so more and more people have a chance to attend literary programs rather than the 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 that came for a weekend to Columbia to the book festival. And then, of course, we have 2 wonderful programs that are really designed in many cases for libraries, and that's our Speakers Bureau. And you're going to hear from Tom and Susie in just a minute. We have more than 40 speakers currently on the Bureau, and we'll be adding some more soon. The last I saw, we had over 150 different topics available, and it's a very interesting range of topics, everything from growing up Gullah to poetry and public life to historical impersonations of people like Abraham Lincoln and Rachel Carson. You can go to our website and look up Humanities Out Loud, and you can see pictures and biographies, short biographies of all the speakers. The application is on our website. It's a one-page, very simple application, short one. That's a program where we do reach an awful lot of libraries and other venues that Tom and Suzie will talk to you about as well. We're always trying to reach not only a young population, but also a senior population. And the Speakers Bureau helps us in that regard too. A lot of some of our senior centers and so forth appreciate the Speakers Bureau. The oldest program that we have that's still going, that started with us in 1984, and Sarah's shaking her head, she and I are old enough to remember that, is the Let's Talk About It program, reading and discussion program. It has, has ebbed and flowed in all of those years, but still some libraries are taking part and advantage of that, of getting a series of books from the state library, finding a scholar or a good professional person to help lead discussions with the readers with those particular books and subject matter. We got everything from women's autobiography to heritage and South Carolina literature to all kinds of things. Again, you can see all the various series that are available for the Let's Talk About It program on our website. We provide a grant for $500 to the library for helping the honorarium of the people who are presenting and leading discussions. I'm a member of a book club. I said this is kind of like a book club, only a little more, maybe more sophisticated book club. But anyway, we've had a lot of people involved with that. Let me give you just real quickly, and then I'm going to be quiet here, just a couple of recent grants that involve libraries, just to give you an idea of that. We just gave a grant to the Georgetown County Library for a program called Blue Hills to Green Sea, representing South Carolina foodways. What they're doing a symposium on food and bringing in scholars by Zoom, and bringing in scholars from not only in-state, but out of state to discuss important food and foodways in South Carolina. But along with that, they're doing a digital video series of South Carolina chefs who are demonstrating their practice of preparing culturally significant meals. And they're also doing a digitalization project of community cookbooks and making those available in their public library archives or collections. Richland County Library, or it's now Richland Library, got a grant from us to do a discussion called Let's Talk Race Community-Wide. And it involves 3 different speakers, presenters. The first one was Dr. Ibram Kendi and his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Again, these are hosted through Zoom. And there's discussions and forums on the topic of race, and they're trying to, of course, get as many community people involved in that as possible. Greenville County Library recently got a grant to do a program called Rhythms and Rhymes, Music and Poetry. And they're bringing local musicians to prepare, in many cases, new music, but to the first one they did was a local musical group who wrote original music and featured the poetry of Emily Dickinson. with that. That was kind of interesting. Then they had a guy that gave a talk about Carl Sandburg's love of the Spanish classical guitar. So you see a lot of different things in public libraries. You should, and it serves a lot of different people. The Chesterfield County Library did a big program on the American South, a sweet tea commentary, where they had a storyteller and performer who talked about Southern traditions, including burial customs, food, superstitions, wedding etiquette, and more. And I like this one. The York County Library just got a grant from us to do a program on kindness. And what they're doing is bringing, they're featuring 4 different books for 4 different age groups. There's for young children, they're giving them a book. They give 100 books to each group: children, middle school children, high school children, and adults. And they give 100 copies of these, and they have discussions on this, but they're all around the theme of kindness. The children's book is a kindness themed picture book, Thank You, Omu, by a person named Mora. The upper elementary students received the book Restart by Gordon Corman. High school readers received Genesis Begins Again by Alicia Williams. And adult patrons read The 1 in a Million Boy by Monica Wood. But it's kind of interesting that they're trying to get different groups of people reading and talking about the overall theme of kindness. And we could certainly use more of that around too. So that's just to give you kind of a glimpse and a taste, and I'll be happy to answer questions. But we are an ally. We love public libraries, and we appreciate all you do. When I give a talk, I normally say this: the Public Humanities, South Carolina Humanities, is an office with 4 people. But where the public humanities is practiced in locations and in buildings are the public libraries in our communities, in our counties. That's the real heart of the public humanities. So we're in this together, and appreciate all that you do. All right, thank you.
Randy, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. That was some fantastic information. I love the specific examples. Thank you. I actually was a volunteer at the very last book festival. I didn't know it was going to be the last book festival at the time, and I still have my volunteer t-shirt. I was working as a part-time nonprofit director for the Friends of the Lexington Main Library, and I wanted to get more into having author events, and I thought, well, what better way to learn than to go volunteer at the book festival and just basically steal all the ideas that they have. Little did I know what I was getting in for. I volunteered for the shift where Pat Conroy was there. So everyone in South Carolina came. And then he's decided at the last minute that he was going to sign autographs, even though he had told no one that he was going to do this and that it was not set up or anything. And I never thought I'd see TJ or Jonathan Haupt's eyes roll back so quickly in their head. It's very dramatic. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you do. I did put a link to your website, to the South Carolina Humanities website, in the chat if anyone is interested there. And if anyone has any more questions for Randy, please feel free to either hold them at the end when we open up turn off all the mute, or put it in the chat and we'll get that question to him. So we'll move on to one of the Speaker Bureau speakers. Tom, if you would like to go ahead and get us started and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've been involved with the Speakers Bureau program, and a little bit about your presentation.
Okay, well, I've been involved with the Speakers Bureau, I guess 4 or 5 years now. And I speak to a lot of libraries all over the state, a few museums. He mentioned the Smithsonian exhibit. I was invited to take part in that at Newberry Opera House. So Opera House is getting in the mix too. But I speak to libraries all over the state, and I'm fortunate in that I have subject matter that I can show, photographs of the back roads. I've been doing a lot of back roads presentations, South Carolina country roads, classic Carolina road trips, and then more recently, the last Sunday drive, which you have to have silver hair like me to remember that kind of tradition. Kids today don't know what it's about, probably a trip to the mall or something. But I love going to the libraries, and I like the way the process works, and I enjoy the people that come there. And when they come to hear me speak, I have one rule: nothing boring, nothing boring. I'm lucky because I can show photographs. And so one thing that a library can do is when you have a speaker coming who's going to show a PowerPoint or images or what have you, it's great to be in a room where you can control the light. Sometimes you'll be in a room with outside window light coming in and your images get kind of washed out. People can't see them very well. So it's good if you can have an interior room where you can control the light. Another thing that I like to do with my events is I encourage the participants to ask me questions throughout the presentation rather than at the end, for two reasons. One, it keeps people engaged, they can participate, and it makes it more interesting because sometimes their questions will take me into a direction I hadn't really thought about. For example, the latest book that I've been going to libraries with is the Carolina Bay book that Robert Clark and I worked on for about 7 years. The Carolina Bays, most people don't know what they are. If I see 20 people in a library, one person might know what a Carolina Bay is, and I could get into that right now, but I'll just say they're very strange, mysterious landforms in the coastal plain of the southeast seaboard that no one really knows what created them, and they're tremendous reservoirs of habitat for a lot of diverse species. So I'm lucky that I can show photographs. Now, I've been to events at the library where people write novels, and they'll read and read and read and read. And I have found that bores people. The more famous the writer, the more interesting you are, and they want to talk to you about you and your work and your life rather than just hear it. So those are some of my suggestions. The Lexington County Library System has been very good to me. They've almost adopted me as a favored son. Every summer, I participate in their summer adult reading program. It's going on about 5 or 6 years now. They're very good to work with. So I do love the libraries. I enjoy going to them. And, going forward, I'm going to try to continue to do these presentations that introduce people to subject matter they've never seen. I'll give one example of that, and I'll be quiet for a second. That is, a few weeks ago, I went on a ramble into the rural countryside of Georgia, where I found an abandoned cemetery where there were some African-American slaves graves with mounds of seashells cemented over them. And I'd never seen this before. And I found out it's a tradition from the Reconstruction days, Victorian times, when they would put the shells on there because of several reasons. One, it symbolized their coming to America by the sea, and the sea would set them free and take them to the promised land. So the seashells were very symbolic. They liked to mound these mounds of clay that would wash away with a heavy rain. So the seashells act like shingles on a roof, and they divert the water, and these mounds remain intact. And the third interesting thing, and I think a library audience would love hearing this kind of subject matter, once a year, the African-American communities would send a salt team to the coast, and they'd stay down there quite a while, boiling seawater and collecting salt, because that was something that was hard to come by for them. And while they were there, they would catch fish, pack them in the salt, and collect seashells, clam shells, for future funerals looking forward. And it's a wonderful story with 3 really interesting meanings to it behind it. And so these are the kind of things I like to go out and speak to the people in libraries about. I don't read to them unless they request it. I like to engage them and talk to them about it. So those are some of my thoughts. And it's been a wonderful experience for me. I love libraries.
Well, as someone who has been affiliated with the Lexington County Public Library System, yes, Tom, your programs are very well received in Lexington County, and they're always fascinating. I follow Tom on social media, and if anyone is on social media and does not follow Tom Poland, I would definitely recommend you do so, because he will post some of the photos from his Sunday drives and backwoods ramblings and excursions. And I saw some really interesting ones about moonshine recently. What was that all about?
I found a moonshine still, what was left of it, over in Greenwood County. A friend that I met through talking to the people of Edgefield County at the Tompkins Memorial Library over there, Ralph Scurry, introduced me as another Louis Grizzard, which I don't think I can live up to that. But he and I became friends, and he and I rambled the other day down these back roads, and we found this old moonshine still that was left on a spring, beautiful clear water. I think you could have consumed some of that water. It wouldn't hurt you at all. And up in a bank on that hillside earlier, he had found something sticking out of the ground. And it was an old Edgefield stacker jug. And those are worth about $300 each. Brown jug. Kind of looks like something the typical stereotypical moonshiner would swig out of, you know, and they would put their moonshine in it. So these are the kind of things that I like to go pursue. And it's sort of become an energizing itself, because I write columns for anywhere from 11 to sometimes as many as 60 newspapers in Georgia and South Carolina every week for the weeklies. Depends on who picks me up. And my readers will contact me and say, you've got to come down here and see what we found. So it really is a great source of a wealth of information and photo opportunities and things that I can share with people who, you know, they don't get out. They travel the interstates when they should be on the back roads.
We appreciate you being out there and photographing us for us. I can't help but think that perhaps some sort of program with moonshine, I don't know if we could hold that in a library, but I can't help but think that might be a pretty,
We might could get some non-alcoholic juice of some sort and fake it.
There you go. We could do that. You better be careful though, Tom. I remember a story that Rudy Menke told at the Lexington Main Library years ago about people would bring him things over the years. We better be careful with people not bringing you. Here's some random thing I found in the woods.
I get old bricks, old magazines and stuff. I'll say real quick too, we're talking about libraries. I stumbled across an abandoned house in Georgia, and this just blows the mind. It had a reading library room in it with all the books still in the shelves left from the 50s. Old Look and Life magazines everywhere. A clawfoot tub, old cast iron pots, a front door that was about 10 feet wide and 12 feet tall, just a massive door. And these places are out there everywhere. It's just a wealth of stuff out there that's waiting for trespassers like me. I had to trespass. I didn't carry a South Carolina media press card. That helps a little bit.
I could imagine. Maybe the camera helps a little bit, or maybe not.
It helps. It helps.
Well, thank you, Tom. We really do appreciate it. I put a link to your website in our chat if anyone is interested in checking out Tom's website. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Suzie, if you want to go ahead and say hello, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your presentation and some of your presentation experience.
Yes, I'm Suzie Parker Devoe. I'm very new to the Speakers Bureau, just over a year. I can't believe I haven't seen Tom yet. I love to go on the back roads. My father used to take me on Sunday rides, Sundays on his Kawasaki. We would go on instead of in the car, but I like to ramble around Liberty County, which is the book that I'm working on now. I go down there a lot to do some research. I have to agree with Tom, technology, because I'm not technical. So I'm always hoping somebody else is. So everybody run out there and get one of those grants from the Humanities Council to upgrade your technology, because that's the biggest thing is the lighting. Actually, my last presentation was a problem because they wanted to keep it on Facebook Live, and it was a live event. But on Facebook Live, you couldn't see the slides. I do use slides, not a lot, because there aren't tons from the time period that I speak in. I speak about women in Reconstruction. And a funny story, I was at an event here in Beaufort with a whole bunch of male historians and talking about Reconstruction and the new park and the new monument. And one of my friends introduced me to one of them and says, yes, Suzie does a talk on women in Reconstruction. And they said, wow, we've never thought of that before. And I was like, oh yeah, what a concept. I haven't even spoken in a library yet, and I really want to. Like I said, I'm new in COVID, so I've had mostly virtual events, some live events. But it's great because it's a talk about three women, three very different women, different ages, different races, different backgrounds, who all end up in South Carolina in 1862, all within that year. Fascinating backgrounds. I talk about Suzie Baker King Taylor, Charlotte Fortin, and Laura Town. And what's great for libraries is they all wrote down, their experiences for us to then enjoy. And I like to point that out and say, here, it's for you can read this too. And it's great for Women's History Month, which people are always looking for something for that month. It's my favorite month to speak in. And I do read. I read from the journals. I'm a trained actor, so I like to kind of give more of a dramatic reading from the journals, the different experiences. I love to do Q&As. I usually wait to the end, but I think now after Tom's spoken, maybe I'll mix it up and let people ask a question whenever they want, because the biggest issue that I have is I always try to keep my talk at 50 minutes. My theater background just drives me to say, leave them wanting more. So I try to just hone in at that and answer questions after. And, I think it's important to not go on too long. But it's hard to fit all of these three women in 50 minutes because they're amazing. I've actually been thinking I need to split my talk up into two pieces. I've mostly spoken to an older audience, and it's amazing how many people just don't know anything about any of these women. And what I really would be interested to see is how a younger female audience responds to this. I think it would be great to see how they react and the questions they ask. And that's what I hope to do in the future with it is really, get that younger generation of women and say, what do you think about these lives of these women? It's women's history, it's American history, it's Civil War history, it's South Carolina history. It's all of those things wrapped up in one. And, I can't say enough about all these women. So, and there's some men in the story too, definitely. Gotta have a few soldiers in there.
We'll let a few in, right?
Yeah, just a few. So.
Suzie, prior to COVID, where were some of the locations you were giving some of your presentations?
I wasn't. I'm so new to the Speakers Bureau. I was new for the 2020 end of 2019, 2020 year. So 2020, March of 2020, Women's History Month, was my first talk on March 15th at the Penn Center for the Hastings Gantt series. And it was barely like we had hand sanitizer. People were all talking about where you could find toilet paper. It was really like, this was it. And Beaufort actually shut down 4 or 5 days later. The libraries closed 4 or 5 days later. And libraries are the best places ever. So.
Your topic is so unique. What got you interested?
Oh, that's a very good question. I stumbled upon a journal in the Doc South about this woman. I had been reading a lot about Civil War women who disguised themselves as soldiers and who got away with it, how they lived, why they did so. And I just found that it was an amazing journal. I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard of it. I'm from Georgia. And she was an enslaved woman that was born in Liberty County and then secretly educated in Savannah, Georgia. And I was like, somebody's got to do something about this story. And I tried to get some friends of mine to write a screenplay, and then Netflix and everything was changing. And so I started to write a historical fiction, and I'm still writing it. so I'm going to be finished this year. So that's how I stumbled into it. And I grew up in Georgia, but my parents used to bring me here to the Sea Islands when I was young and into Savannah. And so I visited the Penn Center 15 years ago before anyone was kind of going to the Penn Center. And I knew about Laura Town and Charlotte Fortin. And the more I was reading about them, I was like, wow, they were all at this doing the same thing at the same time, but they were all so different and from very different places. And I just found that the ways to connect their stories within this 1 year was fascinating to me. Yeah.
You got two Georgia writers here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Georgia native also.
Well, I love that Georgialina. I'm going to have to steal that term from you. I've never heard that. I was North Georgia, so it doesn't really count over the border, but I think it
Yeah,
works.
well, we're all members of what I call the region Georgialina, because we got
Yeah.
Georgia and South Carolina. And I grew up on the border, 4 or 5 minutes from South Carolina. So I sort of grew up with dual citizenship, you might say.
Yeah, exactly. You've got a double passport.
Speak 2 tongues, you know.
Right.
I remember that from your presentation, Tom, Georgialina. That's right.
Yeah, that's one that was pretty popular when the book first came out. I think it's 2015. My mother never liked the fact that I was over here writing books about South Carolina, and she never let me forget that. And so I decided I was going to have a book that had Georgia on the cover somehow. And doggone it, she didn't go ahead and die before the book came out. But what I did, I wrote a column for the hometown paper with the dedication to her in there, and she was happy. So that's how the term Georgialina came up. But I got to confess, I've heard it in the car commercials in Augusta, Georgia. You come on down here to Georgialina, we got the best deals on the lot, you know, that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, that's a good term though for this region, because I really feel like I belong to both states now, even though I am a bulldog.
Oh, yeah. Well, we won't get into the rambling wreck and the bulldog talk.
Okay, we won't do that. But the libraries are great. You know, you talk the friends of the libraries. Well, the libraries are great friends to writers too. It works that way also. And I've always enjoyed the Lexington County libraries I go to in Swansea, Gilbert, Irmo, of course. And then I've been over across the state to Conway and up in the northwest corner around Chattooga River, Darlington and Florence. Just great people wherever you go. When you go into the libraries, you're never going to be disappointed. Never.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was a map of, you know, different. I know they've been talking about South Carolina writers and a map, and maybe the libraries too. I had not been out to the St. Helena's library.
Mhm.
I always go to the Beaufort one, and I walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe how beautiful that library is.
Mhm.
So Randy, I mean, how many libraries are there in the state of South Carolina? I'm just curious. I don't know the answer.
Well, Marlena probably knows better than I do on that. I mean, of course, each county, I'm not sure how many branches are in each county. I mean,
Yeah.
like
I'm unmuting myself so that I can answer the
Yeah.
question. Is
Oh,
that
thank
We
okay?
have a resident expert.
South Carolina is unique in that each county has a library. And that is state law, that each county shall have a public library. And we do not have municipal libraries. And we don't have very many regional libraries. They're mostly standalone county public libraries. We have 46 counties. And most counties have at least 1 or 2 branches. The larger counties may have as many as 10 or 11 or 12. So there are multiple locations, but there is a public library presence in all 46 counties in South Carolina. So I'll unmute myself now. That was my.
Oh, good.
Thank you,
That was
Sarah.
very interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate that.
Well, I think it's the one thing that's really important, as we all know, is to promote the heck out of it beforehand. Social media is great for that. And I never forget to acknowledge the Humanities Center, because they've been so good to me since I joined them. And I thought maybe it might be a good idea, and sometimes you see this, to have a little graphic up where the speaker is, that this event's brought to you by sponsorship from the South Carolina Center for Humanities. We always acknowledge that, the people who are hosting it. And I always make a point to do that, but to have it up in front of them might be a nice idea.
Yeah. I actually have a slide.
Do you? I do that too.
All right.
So yeah, that's a good point. Is promotion. And I think it's been interesting. I think, because I only have the experience during COVID, it's been very difficult to know. Like one event, it was posted as sold out, but it actually wasn't, because people got confused if they were going to be live or they were signing up for Facebook. So I think that's important. I think it's really going to be important this year to figure out how much virtual and live you will need to do, and will you do recordings. And I don't know if Tom feels this way, but I do ask if this presentation is property of the presenter or something like that, because when you're recorded and it's out there, I'm like, I've been researching for a long time. Please don't record my talk and just take it somewhere and do a better job than I do or something. So I think that's another important thing just to remember. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. I mean, I personally am hoping there's a lot of live events, but libraries are a great place to have smaller audiences and feel like you're safer, I think. So I'm hoping that works this year.
That's a really good point about proprietary material. That is something that maybe a conversation needs to happen between a friends group and a speaker, because when we're doing virtual events like this, much more of it is more likely to be recorded. So that's a very good point, Susie.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let me check the chat to see if we have any particular questions. Okay, I don't see anything yet. All right, well, if anybody has any questions for Randy, Tom, or Susie, please feel free to put it in the chat. And actually, what I'm going to go ahead now is unmute everybody. And if any of our speakers has anything that they would like to add, as I am unmuting everybody. I'm asking you to unmute, you are welcome to not. So just everybody at home, if you are do not want to unmute yourself, you certainly do not have to. All right. Well, I can speak to the actual grant process for the Speaker Bureau grant application. I've applied for that grant for the Friends of South Carolina Libraries, as well as the local group that I was affiliated with, the Friends of the Lexington Main Library, and the grant process is very seamless. It is a very easy grant process. The requirements of the grant are very clearly laid out. It does specifically state, this is our logo. We do ask that you specifically recognize the program, but the language is provided for you. It's a very easy process. But sometimes we can forget. So we write ourselves little notes. Sometimes I think it's a great idea to have one of your friends members whose sole job it is to remember to recognize the grant that is covering the program. If for some reason the board president or whoever is introducing forgets or neglects to mention it, it's that one person. You have one job. You have one job. Make sure we recognize that. I like the idea of slides. That's a great idea, especially for virtual programs. But honestly, some of these posters that you can have, the cost is not terrible. You can get a nice yard sign for about $30, $35 in color, and that can help promote your event. It doesn't have to be huge. You can put it up on like a tabletop type of thing. Excellent suggestions, everybody, really. All right, does anyone else have anything that they would like to add?
Well, I want to add one thing. Just about 4 weeks ago, I actually had a face-to-face humanities event in Walterboro at the Walterboro Museum and Farm Market. And it was really nice to see people in person. Some of the audience members kept their mask on. Most did not. It was almost a glimpse of a return to normalcy. And I hope that trend will gain some momentum and everything will be okay and safe for everybody as we go forward in 2021.
I do think some libraries are starting to open back up. They're starting to plan their events. So this is actually a great time to start thinking of your friends groups. What type of events may you plan for the end of the year, or even looking forward to 2022? It's time. We've all missed a few annual meetings. The Friends of South Carolina Libraries, Susie, we were actually scheduled to have our annual conference at the St. Helena Branch Library in Beaufort.
Oh.
And that was going to be it was in November 2020. So of course we had to move to a virtual platform, but I did travel to Beaufort and we broadcasted our events from that library in conjunction with the Pat Conroy Literary Festival. And it was phenomenal. That facility is gorgeous. And Amanda Dickman there, who was the interim director and has now been named the library director for Beaufort County. We were so impressed with her technology, and she described the fantastic fiber cables that they have running to that branch and to the Penn Center right next door. They have their technology is state of the art in that area. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope to spend more time out there. So yeah,
Beautiful.
beautiful place.
Marlene, I'd just like to say that I do recognize library and library staffs are often overworked. And it's sometimes seen as a burden to try to apply for a grant or to do extra programming or so forth. That's where I think sometimes friends groups can be very, very helpful, because you have some wonderful volunteers with a lot of different experiences, and many of them are not afraid to write a grant application to South Carolina Humanities. And by the way, TJ Wallace will hold your hand if you need that in that process. She's maybe one of the best grants persons that I've ever met. And I've been around 38 years in this business. Yeah, I do understand the pressure, and sometimes you don't have the staff to facilitate or do the kinds of things that you really would like. But, hopefully that, and of course, like the Speakers Bureau, we try to make that application as easy as possible. And so it's not cumbersome upon too many people. And of course, some of your larger libraries now have what they call development people who are writing grants. Richland Library has a development officer. So, and Georgetown has a wonderful capacity of writing grants, their library. So, not everybody is the same, and not everybody has the same kind of assets and can do the same kind of programs, but give us a shot. We'll work with you and try and make it as easy as possible, but also as meaningful as possible.
We appreciate that, Randy. Thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful way to start to wrap up. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to, again, interject or put that in the chat. If you would like contact information for either of our speakers, you can get that information on the Humanities website, and that link is in the chat now. So if you've enjoyed the conversation this evening, I would invite you to consider to join the Friends of South Carolina Libraries, either as a friends group or an individual. It's easy to join at www.foscl.org. This organization, the Friends of South Carolina Libraries, is truly a team effort, and we would love to have you on our team. If you're interested in joining the board, please reach out to me, or better yet, if you know of anybody who may be interested in joining our board and learning more about what we're about, just give me their phone number and I'll go ahead and give them a call. Thank you so much to Randy, Suzie, and Tom for joining us this evening. It's been a real honor. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. I'd like you to save the date on your calendar for our next two virtual visits. We've got Thursday, July 15th at 6 p.m. and we've got Thursday, October 21st at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a lovely evening, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.